The first time it felt real, undeniably real, was at that reception. We were in the Bennett's home, perched on a bluff in one of those coastal suburbs where the air smells faintly of salt and expensive landscaping. You know the kind of place. Manicured hedges trimmed to military precision, uplighting on palm trees, a circular driveway that could fit half a dozen cars without anyone needing to move. Even before I stepped inside, I felt like an outsider. Ava had insisted I come, though she'd said it like an afterthought. "Oh, you should be there too." I had the sense it wasn't really part of her plan. Inside, the air was warm with the hum of polite laughter, the clink of glasses, and that unspoken hierarchy you get at corporate events. Everyone was here for Cole Bennett, the CEO, her boss, the man at the center of all those neatly pressed suits and carefully chosen dresses. People orbited him like he was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets, grateful for whatever light and warmth we could get. Ava didn't just orbit him. She moved like someone who had clearance for the innermost circle. I'd seen her work a room before, but this was different. She adjusted his lapels like she was the stylist flown in to make him camera-ready. She kept her hand looped through his arm like it belonged there, her thumb grazing the sleeve of his jacket in a way that looked too familiar for anyone just doing event logistics. When he spoke, she laughed, every time, and leaned in close enough that their heads nearly touched. It wasn't subtle. Not to me. Not to anyone paying real attention. I stood there for a while, drink in hand, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe she was just being charming, keeping up appearances for the company. But every so often, her eyes would scan the room. Not to look for me, but to check who was watching them. When Cole bent down to whisper something, his cuff caught the light, and I saw it. A faint smear of lipstick, the same deep, wine-red shade Ava had chosen that night. I knew because I'd watched her apply it in the mirror before we left, blotting carefully on a tissue, then smiling at her reflection like she knew she looked dangerous. Later, at home, when I went to put away her clutch, one of those small, rigid ones that barely fits a phone, I noticed the weight. Inside were the usual things. Phone, lipstick, compact, a folded cocktail napkin with what looked like a table number written on it. And tucked behind the lining, like an afterthought, were 2 Harborview Suites keycards. Both had the same check-in timestamp. Both were for the executive floor. When I asked her about them, she didn't miss a beat. She gave me that perfect, practiced smile, the one that softened her eyes just enough to pass for sincerity, and called it a mix-up with the hotel gift bags. Apparently, in her version of events, 2 separate room keys with matching check-in times could just accidentally end up in her purse. And as for the lapel straightening, the arm linking, the lipstick on her boss's cuff, that was all part of the event. Keeping the CEO looking sharp, making sure the press photos came out right. She didn't know it yet, but that was the moment something in me shifted. The moment I started to pull away, not physically, not yet, but in the ways that mattered. You could call it instinct or maybe self-preservation. She'd spent the entire evening acting like I wasn't there, so I started picturing what life would be like if I really wasn't. When we got home, she disappeared into the bathroom, shutting the door behind her. I sat in the living room, jacket still on, thinking about the way she'd avoided introducing me to people that night, how she'd looked over me when talking to colleagues. She hadn't just erased me from the picture, she'd cropped me out entirely. And when I went to grab my coat from the chair where she'd draped it earlier, I saw it. A small, black external drive, half slipped from the side pocket of her bag. The label read, Q3_deals. I turned it over in my hand. It didn't look like something you'd carry around for a cocktail reception, and certainly not something you'd casually leave behind. I told myself I'd give it back to her in the morning. That's what a good husband would do, trust his wife and not go looking for trouble. But I wasn't sure I was that husband anymore. Not after tonight. What I didn't know then was that this drive contained more than I'd ever imagined. It wasn't just spreadsheets and meeting notes. It was a map, a quiet ledger of where she'd been, who she'd been with, and how far the 2 of them had gone to make sure I never connected the dots. In hindsight, I think Ava believed she could frame the entire night as harmless. A little charm, a little proximity to power, all in service of event logistics. She underestimated how much of that charm had curdled for me. How once you've seen someone look at another person like that, you can't unsee it. That night, when I finally went to bed, she was already asleep, or pretending to be. Her back was to me, her breathing slow and even, like someone who didn't have a thing in the world to hide. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the waves crash in the distance, and thinking about the weight of that drive in my coat pocket. It was strange. The house felt different already, colder, like the foundation had shifted just a fraction, enough that I could feel it underfoot. And somewhere in that space between midnight and morning, I made a quiet promise to myself. Whatever was on that drive, I'd see it for myself, because whether Ava wanted to admit it or not, the truth had already stepped into the room with us, and I wasn't about to let it walk back out unnoticed. I didn't open the drive that night. I let it sit on the dresser like a small black moon tugging at the tide of my nerves. By morning, the pull had a name. Every odd moment I'd been brushing off for months. The reception hadn't created anything. It just turned up the brightness on a picture that was already there, hiding in low light. The first thing that came back was location sharing. We'd switched it on years ago for a road trip and never turned it off. Then one afternoon in late spring, under her name it said, "Location not available." I asked if low power mode K** let it. She said yes, smiled, and fixed it with 3 taps I didn't see. A week later, same thing. After that, it never worked again. Glitch, she said, like the word could sand down the edges of reality. Then there were the night design courses. Ava works in operations, not design, but she said the company was covering continuing education. Classes were supposedly at the Harbor Center Business Hub, one of those glassy tombs that empties after 6 except for the vacuum crews. Cole's parent company leases the top floor there. Every time she went, she came home with handouts that looked like they'd been assembled by someone allergic to substance. No graded projects, no portal logins, just buzzwords, the kind that evaporate in daylight. Saturdays turned into a copy-paste. Same boutique hotel on Ocean Avenue. Client hospitality checks, she said. Always right after her bar class. Always with the same overnight bag that could devour a weekend. She'd leave at noon to swing by and make sure the conference suites met brand standard. Our statements told different stories. Champagne by the glass, seafood towers you order to be seen ordering, room service charges stamped at 8:11 a.m. with breakfast for 2. Meanwhile, the hotel's Instagram posted sunsets that looked suspiciously like the ones reflected in her sunglasses on the camera roll. Her phone rules changed, too. It started living face down like it was shy. New passcode. New focus modes. New habit of taking calls on the back patio with her voice turned featherlight. If I stepped out to put a bottle in the recycling, the call would drop. I wasn't trying to catch her. My body just noticed before my brain would admit it. The way her shoulders tightened when my foot hit the threshold, like she could hear the floorboard decide for her. Gifts began appearing with no recipients. A leather card case for Madison in marketing that Madison somehow never carried. A silk scarf for my mom that never showed up in any brunch photos. A pair of cufflinks for a vendor's promotion. The vendor posted a celebration selfie in a t-shirt and baseball cap. The cufflink box stayed in our closet, empty, like a small door left open. Money started speaking a language I recognized. Patterns. Restaurant bills from places we'd never been together, often in pairs, one charge at 7:12 p.m. Another at 9:03, same venue, same night. 2 tops. A dessert we don't eat. A bottle we wouldn't order. Rideshare receipts pinged from the same 4-block square by Harborview Suites, where the elevators smell like citrus and discretion. She opened a new credit card for work reimbursables. I wasn't invited to that ledger. Then came the personal brand. Overnight she had opinions about ring lights, presets, micro-influencer collabs, and the perfect LinkedIn cadence. She hired a photographer just for #TS. Then 2 more to refresh the grid. Those shoots always lined up with executive retreats a couple towns up the coast. She'd leave with a suitcase that made no sense for a day trip and come back with salt in her hair and a new rule about separating channels when I asked to see a photo. Every time I asked a simple question, I got a polished answer with no weight. She's good, award-winning good, at telling a story that looks responsible from 5 feet away. We're piloting a vendor this quarter. The board wants extra touch points. Cole's team is pushing a rollout. We all have to flex. Somewhere in there, we stopped meaning the two of us. It kept meaning the same handful of names that orbited Cole. I told myself I was being dramatic, that marriages go through phases, that success asks for time, that jealousy is a sloppy lens. But small things kept piling up like receipts in the cup holder. The Harbor Center security office called once looking for A. Carter's lost badge. Ava said HR handled it. A week later, a packet from Riverview Lofts landed in our mailbox. Welcome folder, gate codes, parking map. Marketing mail, she said, tossing it toward the recycling. Paper shifted. I saw a unit number peeking through the translucent sleeve. Another Saturday, she asked me to sign for a courier while she was in a session. Inside the envelope, a glossy booklet titled Personal Transition Plan. All compass metaphors and lighthouse imagery. The kind of corporate poetry that tries to make leaving sound like arriving. Ms. Delivered, she said. Another Carter. Sure, same last name, same address, same talent for smiling through doors. I kept rewinding the months like I could edit them into a cleaner cut. There was the boutique hotel loyalty email in our joint inbox thanking you and guest for another memorable stay. The noon gym classes that somehow ended with surge pricing downtown. A dinner reservation made from my phone when my phone was in my pocket because I was the one who booked it after she texted. Can you grab this? A mid-call. She arrived late and said the client meeting ran long. The receipt showed a table for 2. One entree canceled at the last second. A second dessert added. If you've lived with doubt, you know the rhythm it teaches your body. Your breathing shortens without permission. You rehearse conversations you never have. You catalog smells. Hotel jasmine, lobby citrus, a cologne that isn't yours, faint on the cuff of a blazer you didn't wear. You find a hair tie in the dryer stamped with a little wave logo that matches the spa on the executive floor. You hear yourself say, "It's nothing," and you hate the wobble in your own voice. I tried to restore ordinary. Sunday pancakes, errands together, a movie on the couch. But every routine buckled under another routine, the one running on a clock I wasn't allowed to see. She set alarms to vibrate and kept a second charger at work. She brought home candle samples. Sea salt, bergamot white tea, and our place started smelling like lobbies I hadn't visited. More than once I woke at 2:17 a.m. to the soft hum of an email draft, her screen a rectangle of winter light. Friends invited us to things. I said yes without looking at her. She said, "We'll try," which is adult for no. She upgraded her luggage. She downgraded her availability. At some point, she stopped reaching for my hand in the dark. At some point, I stopped offering it. We didn't decide that together. It happened like weather, gradual, then obvious. Ava started a notes habit, little to-do lists propped against the fruit bowl. Pick up dry cleaning. Send Madison link. Confirm OB. The rest of the line blacked out with the heel of her thumb. I wasn't on the list anymore. I was the counter space she used to make it. The interviews began, podcasts I'd never heard of, panels moderated by people who thought Synergy still had shine. She said the company wanted her front-facing. I asked if that meant more travel. Only strategic, she said. I didn't ask what counted as strategic. I already knew. Once, late, she came home in a dress I'd never seen, the color of storm glass. The zipper was slightly crooked, like someone else had done it up fast. Car door, she said when I noticed the scuff near her shoulder blade. I nodded like husbands are supposed to nod. Then I picked up her coat and a folded invoice fell out. Harborview Suites, executive floor, 2 keycards issued within the same minute. I put the invoice back where I found it and set her coat on a chair. I stared at the wall until the room stopped tilting. The night at the Bennetts didn't invent any of this. It underlined it in permanent ink. By the time we left that cliffside address, my head wasn't spinning. It was sorting. On the drive home, I felt the kind of quiet that comes with accepting you're not crazy. I didn't need fireworks. I needed a ledger. So I made one. Not a revenge diary. A record. Dates, times, who, where. Screensh *TS of bills. Photos of her suitcase on days that were supposedly 4-hour sessions. The minute she flipped location, sharing off the second time. The exact phrasing when she called me protective, which is the word you use for someone who notices. Then I started drawing lines, not conclusions, just lines. Harbor Center to Ocean Avenue. Ocean Avenue to Harborview Suites. Harborview to Design Course. Design Course to Cole's after-hours calendar block that somehow mirrored hers. The lines didn't cross. They braided. I told myself I'd wait for something definitive, one clear cut that connected the dots without wobble. I didn't know when it would arrive. I only knew it was already on its way. The wind had picked up. The tide had turned. All I had to do was stop bailing, stand up in the boat, and look over the edge. I didn't open the drive for 2 days. It sat in my desk drawer under tax folders and warranty cards, humming in my head even when the house was quiet. On the third morning, I made coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, shut my office door, and slid the thing into a USB port like I was disarming a bomb. The folder tree bloomed on my screen. Tidy, corporate, confident. Q3_deals contained subfolders labeled with project names that sounded like sailboat models. Mariner, Starline, Vantage. Each held PDFs, decks, spreadsheets. On the surface, nothing scandalous. But when I switched the window to detail view and pulled the date modified, author, and comments columns wider, patterns stepped forward. Document properties repeated 2 names, Ava and Cole Bennett. Comments threads showed midnight edits, quick back and forths from the same IP block. A few files carried a geotag in the attachments. Lazy exports from someone's phone that kept the EXIF data intact. Coordinates, altitude, even the camera model. I copied the coordinates into a map. The pins didn't scatter across the city. They stacked like staples at 2 addresses, Harbor Center and Harborview Suites. One of the metadata strings included PH02, which any hotel website could translate for you. Penthouse, 2nd unit. Another image, a blurred *T of a marble corridor with a brass 28 on the wall, included a timestamp that matched one of those design seminars. The image title, Sitewalk_suite. Not classroom, suite. The drive also had an assets folder with expense summaries. I opened a CSV labeled Q3 Hospitality, Executive. Rows swam into view. Room service, late-night cart charges, and a line that jumped out the way a snake moves in dead grass. Champagne on ice, pitch comped, approved by CB. Another row the next morning. Breakfast for 2, executive floor. The internal note field read, Client relations / do not itemize. I told myself I was still missing context. Maybe something had a reasonable, boring explanation. But the map under my cursor didn't feel boring. It felt choreographed. On the night of her next design seminar, I didn't tell her where I was going. She left in a slate dress with a tote and a precise smile. I waited 20 minutes, then drove to Harborview Suites and parked across from the entrance where the valets jog like they're on camera. Which, of course, they are. Inside, everything smelled like white tea and money. I walked to the front desk and didn't try to be clever. Hey, I said, setting my wallet on the marble. I got a call that a wallet was turned in. Black bifold, initials C. M. No wallet, the agent said. Her badge read Jenna. I nodded like that was expected and dropped my voice. Can I be honest, Jenna? My wife is at a work thing here. We're not doing great, and I'm trying not to be the crazy guy in a movie, but I need to put my head on straight. I set a folded bill on the counter without making a show of it. Is there any way to see if a conference is actually happening on the executive floor tonight? Jenna glanced at the manager on duty, a tall man with the patient expression of someone paid well to have it, then back at me. We don't give out guest information, she said, which wasn't a no so much as a line she had to recite. But I can tell you there are no scheduled conferences after 6 on the executive level. Thank you, I said. I meant it. The manager's eyes flicked to the elevators. The lobby cameras are for security only, he added, which I also took as something other than a no. I didn't press. I took the elevator to 27 with a group of suits, got off, switched to the service stairwell, and climbed one more flight. On 28 the carpet thickened. The air changed temperature by a single design degree. I didn't walk the hall. I didn't need to. At the far end, a brass plate read penthouse. Beyond it, two mirrored doors faced each other like closed arguments. I waited where the hallway bent, out of the sight line of the elevator, counting my heartbeat and hating that I had to count anything. 10 minutes. 12. The elevator dinged so softly it felt like a suggestion. Cole stepped out first, alone, no lanyard, no badge. He wore a jacket you don't pick off a rack and shoes that didn't squeak. He paused, looked both ways, a habit or a tell, then swiped a key at the left-hand door. Green light. He didn't open it. He waited. 50 seconds later. My phone's clock, not memory. Ava stepped out, also alone. The tote now zipped, her hair tucked behind one ear like she'd just set herself on stage. No lanyard. She carried nothing that said classroom. She didn't look around. She walked the 10 steps to the same door, and as she reached for her key, it opened from the inside. Cole didn't touch her. He didn't have to. She slipped past him without a word. The door got small and then was gone. I stood there a full minute with my hand on the wall like the building might tilt. Then I exhaled and noticed the small black dome above the corner. Hallway camera. Fisheye. It faced the elevator and both penthouse doors. I found the service corridor and followed it to a gray door labeled security. Authorized only. I knocked. It opened partway to a guy younger than me. Sleeves rolled. Badge on a lanyard. Kyle. Hey! I said, and kept my tone somewhere between embarrassed and direct. I know you can't show me anything, but I need to report a concern. Someone who shouldn't be up here is up here. I didn't say names. I didn't need to. Hotel people are connoisseurs of implication. Kyle hesitated, then let me into a room with monitors blooming like a low-lit garden. I didn't move closer. He sat, tapped a keyboard, spun back 5 minutes, and there we were on replay. Ding, doors, Cole. Ding, doors, Ava. The pause at the threshold. The green blink. He gave the screen a neutral look I recognized as compassion disguised as procedure. We can save a clip in case management needs it, he said. Can I started, then stopped. He looked at my face for a long second, then slid a form across the desk. Write down the time and the camera number for your records, he said, like he was telling me something else entirely. I wrote. I didn't touch my phone. I didn't need to. The picture was inside me now in a way that didn't ask permission. Back in the lobby, I didn't go home. I sat in a chair near a plant and watched the front desk. At 9:04 p.m., a room service attendant rolled a cart to the executive elevator. Silver bucket, 2 flutes, a covered plate. I walked to the bar, ordered water, and paid cash. When the attendant returned an hour later, the bucket held 2 glasses with lipstick like bookends. One pale, one Ava's shade of wine red. I didn't need to see which floor they came from to know. The next morning the drive gave me what the camera couldn't. A PDF export from the hotel vendor portal. Someone had downloaded the monthly billing report for an executive account and dropped it into assets without stripping metadata. The report listed room charges by internal code. There it was again, Page champagne on ice at 21:08, breakfast for 2 at 7:32. Both attached to a comp code with Cole's initials. A line lower on the page showed a late checkout request approved at 10:11. The dock properties clocked the export at 11:03 a.m. Authored by a Carter. My wife. I printed the relevant page and a still from the hallway clip Kyle had cued. Timestamp, door light, the angle of her shoulder as she slid past him. I didn't need to show anyone. I needed to anchor myself to something that wasn't moving. That night Ava said the seminar went longer than planned, because the instructor added a bonus critique. I nodded. She asked how my day was. I told her I did some file cleanup and a long run. Both were true. She set her tote down and kissed my cheek with the distracted accuracy of someone checking a box. Her eyes passed over me and landed on nothing. I didn't confront her. Not then. I'm not a saint. I just understood the difference between suspicion and proof, between noise and signal. The drive had given me a map. The hotel had given me footage. The billing report had given me a ledger. Together, they made a picture even she couldn't sand down with event logistics. I went back to my office and opened the folder I'd started, record. I added the PDF, a written note about the hallway footage, the time I entered and exited the building, the names on the badges, the exact phrasing of the champagne order I'd glimpsed on the cart's ticket as it rattled by. I wrote down the color of her dress. Not for court. For memory. People talk themselves out of what they saw when they want to. I wasn't going to. Before I shut down for the night, I clicked open one last item I'd ignored. A draft slide deck titled Project Transitions, Executive Summary. On slide 3, a bullet in corporate gray read, Resource Alignment During Post-Family Restructuring. The next line mentioned spousal buyout parameters. I stared at the phrase until the words went soft at the edges. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, palms flat on the desk like I was bracing for aftershocks. The house didn't shake. Nothing dramatic happened. The world kept making its small sounds. The refrigerator, a car on the street, a gull somewhere losing its mind. Inside, something settled into place with the finality of furniture on bare floors. It wasn't a hint anymore. It wasn't a feeling, or a worry, or a story I was telling myself in the absence of facts. It was a timeline with addresses. It was a key light going green. It was champagne and breakfast for two paid through the account of the man who adjusted his cuff while my wife adjusted his lapels. It was the affair, recorded in the language they trusted most. Metadata. The drive sat on my desk for days after that night at Harborview, but it wasn't the only thing taking up space. I had proof of the affair. Video, receipts, timestamps, but proof doesn't explain why. Proof tells you what happened. Motive tells you where it's going. And I needed to know that more than anything. When I went back into the Q3_deals folders, I wasn't looking for hotel bills or champagne orders anymore. I was looking for language, phrases, terms, buried signals and documents not meant for outside eyes. That's when I found a subfolder named Transition Materials. Harmless title. Inside were draft agreements for project transitions between her department and a subsidiary that Cole oversaw directly. At first, it looked like ordinary corporate housekeeping. But the deeper I read, the less it felt like housekeeping and the more it felt like a will. One document was a personal transition brief, a sanitized checklist for stepping away from family obligations to focus on emerging executive priorities. It had Ava's name on it, twice. In the margin of one PDF was a sticky note in a digital handwriting font. Align timing with post-family restructuring to avoid overlap. Another page was a PowerPoint slide with bullet points so vague, they were almost poetic. Streamline commitments, maximize discretionary capital, mitigate conflict of interest exposure. The phrase that stopped me cold was buried halfway down a spreadsheet tab labeled Incentives. It read, Bonus eligibility contingent on finalized spousal buyout. I'd seen corporate euphemisms before, but that one landed like a shove. A buyout was something you offered a partner you were replacing, not a spouse you were keeping. I started cross-referencing. A second file, an internal presentation, outlined retention incentives for key staff during life events. Cole's initials were next to two line items in the budget, both tied to Ava's name. One was an executive transition allowance. The other was relocation support, with a date column matching the lease term of Riverview Lofts, a place I knew only because of that misdelivered welcome packet weeks earlier that sent me into her cloud archive. She'd given me access years ago for photo sharing, probably forgetting the connection existed. In her personal folder was a scanned lease for Unit 4B at Riverview Lofts. Start date in 3 weeks. Rent double what she'd told me. Buried in the fine print was a second tenant add-in scheduled to take effect 30 days later. Signed only with initials. C.B. There were email drafts, too. Most were mundane, half-written replies to colleagues, notes to herself, but one stopped me. The The subject line was a single word. Confirmed. The body was empty. The file date was the day after an OBGYN appointment on our shared insurance portal. I knew because I'd gotten the notification the way you get them for every covered visit. The context sat in my stomach like ice. This wasn't just about an affair. It was about the possibility that the affair had changed everything. I didn't spiral. Not yet. I did what I'd been doing since the night of the Bennett's reception. I documented. I printed the lease, the slide deck, the incentive spreadsheet. I added a note in my own file. Second tenant initials equals Cole Bennett. Confirm date versus appointment. I wasn't ready to confront her about any of it. I wanted the architecture of the whole thing laid out before I moved. That night, she came home humming. Real humming. Like the kind you do when you're keeping something buoyant in your chest. She set her tote down and scrolled her phone while asking about my day. Her eyes didn't land on me for more than a second at a time. I watched her pour a glass of wine, barefoot in the kitchen like nothing in our life had been set on fire, and I knew then I'd been removed from her timeline entirely. She was living in a sequence that didn't include me past the next few weeks. That's when the strategy started to form. I wasn't going to walk in shouting. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of chaos she could call proof of my instability. If she was planning a clean break with maximum payout, I'd make sure the break was still clean, but not in the way she thought. I called a friend who knew corporate law better than marriage law, the kind of person who didn't flinch at the phrase conflict of interest. I told him I had a drive containing internal files from her company. Files that connected personal relationships to contractual terms. He didn't ask how I'd gotten them. He just told me to call a divorce attorney and a compliance officer. If the money's moving where it shouldn't, you want both tracks running, he said. The divorce attorney's first advice was immediate asset protection. Freeze joint accounts, shift savings into an individual account under my name, and establish separate property status before filing. The compliance officer at Cole's parent company was harder to reach, but when I did, I kept it clinical. I described possible unreported personal relationships impacting contract awards and incentives. I offered to provide documentation. I left Ava's name for last, like it was just another data point. The reaction was quieter than I expected. No outrage, no gasps. Just note-taking, a request for a secure upload link, and the kind of professional thank you give when you've been handed a live wire. Over the next week, the attorneys built a timeline from my notes, pairing personal evidence with financial irregularities. Every champagne receipt had a matching project code. Every hotel bill lined up with a budget approval signed by Cole. The lease at Riverview connected to a relocation stipend that hadn't gone through HR's usual process. Even the OBGYN visit slotted neatly into a calendar gap between off-site retreats. By the end of the week, I had 2 parallel cases in motion. One for divorce that would lock down assets before she could touch them, and one inside her company that could freeze whatever bonus she was counting on. The strategy wasn't revenge. It was subtraction, taking away the perks and payouts she'd built the betrayal around. Ava didn't notice the shift right away. She was too busy rehearsing her soft exit from our marriage, the kind that would leave her with an upscale apartment, a cash cushion, and a new title. But I noticed when her phone calls got shorter, when she stopped humming in the kitchen, when a message from Cole B. lit her screen and she turned it over without reading. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. The point wasn't to get her to admit anything. The point was to make sure that when the break came, it happened on ground I'd already chosen. I didn't celebrate the plan. I rehearsed it. The point was not to hurt Ava or embarrass Cole. The point was to be quiet, precise, and finished before either of them realized anything had big asterisk n. First, my lawyer filed the emergency motions, separate property status, a temporary restraining order on joint accounts, and an injunction preventing the sale or transfer of marital assets. He explained it like math. Secure the constants, limit the variables, then solve. I signed where he pointed, my pen moving through a life I'd shared and was now reallocating line by line. I felt nothing heroic in it, just relief that numbers could be colder than feelings. Second, we opened a secure vault for evidence. I uploaded the Harborview footage timestamps, the billing report, the champagne and breakfast entries, the resource alignment during post-family restructuring slide, the incentive spreadsheet, the Riverview lease with the second tenant add-in, every breadcrumb arranged so a stranger could follow them without stumbling. My lawyer added affidavits for chain of custody and a dated inventory. Quiet cases win, he said. Noise gives the other side traction. Third, we coordinated with compliance. I kept my voice steady, never using the word affair, only undisclosed relationship and conflict exposure. The officer asked for a call, then another, then for permission to contact hotel management. I didn't push. I let the system do what systems do when someone flips on the lights. They opened a file, routed it to audit, and scheduled interviews. I didn't have to say Cole's name anymore. It was already stamped on the paper. Ava noticed the first ripple when her corporate card was declined at a florist. She laughed it off with the clerk, but later I heard her in the bathroom, whispering into the phone, "That's odd. Can you check my limit?" Odd turned into "We're reviewing," and reviewing turned into "Please meet with audit." The morning she got that email, she stood in the kitchen reading it like a weather alert. "They want me for a routine compliance check," she said, and she tried to smile, but her lips forgot their script halfway through. I made coffee and slid a mug across the counter. "Routine is good," I said, because the story she needed from me was the one where I didn't know anything. Service of process happened the way I asked. No spectacle, no raised voices, just a polite knock at 7:12 a.m. The courier, neutral suit, neutral face, handed her a packet with tabs in 3 colors. She set it on the console table next to a bowl of smooth gray stones she'd bought to make the entry feel coastal. Papers and stones, both meant to be calming. Only one had weight. She didn't open them right away. She traced the edge of the envelope like it might open itself if she softened enough. "Caleb," she said finally, "what is this?" I told her the truth. It was a petition, it was temporary orders, it was a request to preserve the financial status quo until a complete inventory. "We'll have lawyers talk," I added. She blinked hard, as if she'd misread the room and could still relocate the furniture by will. "We're not," she started, then stopped. Her phone lit with a new email and the moment let itself out the front door. Cole went quiet the same day. The company intranet showed his calendar blocked. Oh. A colleague of Ava's posted a photo of a conference room and captioned it with something nervous and cheerful. "Surprise check-in with the grown-ups." It wasn't subtle if you knew where to look. The grown-ups only show up when someone's been acting like a kid with the keys. In the afternoon, my attorney called with the first returns. The court had granted the freeze. The temporary orders barred either of us from incurring extraordinary expenses or moving funds without written consent.